the semicircle here. I want you to introduce yourself and the years that you were with KVSC.
Okay, I'm Bob Tyson. I came to KVSC in '72, and I graduated in '74.
Okay. And what was your position at KVSC?
Everything from news director to sports director to there were 3 or 4 different topics who just made the best of everything. And
Utility infielder.
yeah, probably, yeah.
Okay. Very good. Rolling Stones curator.
Yeah.
Okay, Kelly.
Kelly Prayman. I came in the fall of '72 and left in the fall of '76. Never did have an official title and enjoyed it just the more.
Probably because you didn't have an official title. Therefore, no distinct responsibility.
Correct.
But you were a mover and shaker, right?
I was a rabble-rouser, and I liked to play rock and roll.
Yeah. Okay. Meanwhile, we have probably the closest thing to an administrative presence here. Peggy?
Thank you. Peggy Keene. I came here in 1968 and I graduated in 1978. By that time, I had a bachelor's and a master's.
Okay. I was going to say that took you a little while, but
Well,
that's all
yeah,
right.
but at that time we were kind of on the long-term plan.
Sure.
But I did an internship in between. At the end, I had to take, 1 class a quarter because I was working professionally full-time at Channel 11
Oh, okay.
at the end. So, yes, I was around during the transition.
Okay. Well, you actually predated these guys then because you were here in '68.
I was here in '68, and I started in the spring, lived in the dorm with a bunch of pals, and as a youngster ended up at a kegger one night and met some really terrific people, some of whom are around here this weekend. And I was asked, kind of hijacked and recruited, I was on a work-study program, to come in and get everybody's signature on the logs. So that's how I initially started at this station.
How did you refer to yourself in the hallway?
Andy called me the log nag.
the log nag.
Some of that has translated into my current life as well, getting people to do things.
Okay.
Maybe I was less polished at that time. I'd just run around and chase them with a pencil and a piece of paper. Now I'm a little more inclusive and a little more diplomatic about asking for things.
Of course you are. Okay. So, at the time when you came to KVSC in '68, and for some years after that, the primary format musically was classical music. Is that right?
Yes, it was classical music, and we also got programming from National Public Radio. So every semester there was a selection of the programs. We had BBC, we had a variety of taped programs that came in, and then there was 1 hour of contemporary music a day, and it was in the evening, and we weren't on 24 hours a day.
Oh, sure.
So, it was limited. It was classical music. We had several really good classical music directors, but it wasn't the sense of what people wanted.
Yeah, young people in 1968 or '72. Yeah.
Well, more segueing to the era of these guys was into the early 70s.
Right. So 1 hour a day of, we're calling it contemporary music. Was it Rolling Stones? You get to play the Stones for an hour a day if you want?
No, it wasn't. It's all classical.
But wasn't there the 1 hour a day?
In the evening, there was just 1 hour.
Correct.
That must have been before my
Little
time.
folk and blues.
Yeah.
Okay. So contemporary music, relatively speaking, but not like you're going to be putting on the Fugs or something like that. Something really revolutionary.
Correct. We
Okay.
were a respectable station.
And that's where you came into action, right? Who would you say was the primary catalyst of the change in the format?
I would say this gentleman,
Kevin Leisha.
Kevin Leisha, Dean Spratt. Peggy was very instrumental. It was a period where we went from suit coats and white shirts and skinny black ties to tie-dye t-shirts. And the music had to come with it because we didn't want to play classical music. And the culture of the station was not conducive to classical music. And
It wasn't conducive to the student volunteers.
Yes.
If that's what you rely on for your creativity and labor source, And so, really was a matter of listening to what people wanted, and then how could we get there. And
The problem was that we couldn't get the kids on campus to listen because they were classical.
Sure.
Forget that, they don't even turn us on.
Right.
So when they came, we did the final thing. Peggy would have the hammer,
the gavel.
and we spent this whole summer going through it in each line on this bill or whatever it was.
Okay, so are you saying that you introduced a policy of something like that? There was you envisioned the station as it would become on paper and presented this sort of as a political.
We were part of the Radio and Television Guild.
Okay.
And the guild was funded by student activities fees.
Okay.
And I think there was some thought that we were underserving students
right.
if all we had was
Correct.
classical music.
Okay.
So, I mean, there was kind of a theory. It wasn't only noisy, rebellious, delightful, passionate people about music. Somehow you have to put together the reality and the justification for it. So the guild put together what they wanted in terms of a program schedule, which had, I think we left a couple little elements of classical in there. We cut back on some of the network programming, and then we put in a lot more of the music that people wanted to hear. But it took a matter of having a guild meeting, talking to Scott Bryce, who was then the faculty advisor to all of it. And for Scott, it was something that was part of his soul, really. He and Andy Marlowe and Mark Johnson and the group that's on the photo outside, they were all the guild in the first place. And they were a little bit more traditional. But when you have the faculty advisor who sort of holds the keys to everything, you do what he wants. Mm-hmm. And the time had come, culturally and everything else, to make some changes. And I think really that's what transpired. So we had a guild meeting. You can't cram the vote to do it and change the faculty advisor. You can say that's what you want to do, and then you have to have another meeting, in fact, to organize it. So the meeting was adjourned. The motion was made. The meeting was adjourned in order to meet the Roberts rules, and everybody went out and took a break. Whatever they did wasn't my business.
Something.
I see.
I did a little something, and then we all came back together. And I think it was traumatic for Scott.
Oh, yeah.
But ultimately, what did he say to you, Kelly?
Well, he said that with time, it became one of the most important decisions impacting him as a professor, because he could now dedicate his energies to the students in mass who came into his department, the mass communications department. He was not hindered by the concept of the radio station. His dreams could be bigger. Mm-hmm. He could talk to you and say, have you ever thought about, and allow you to expand past the Stewart Hall and St. Cloud and look broader. And that was what he was best at cultivating.
And Scott got very involved in the Holocaust Project, the
Yes.
museum, and did so many wonderful things with that. I think after, change is hard. And that change was very traumatic for Scott.
Oh,
I mean, it was just
yes.
kind of heartbreaking. But once, I've been through some big things, as we all have in our lives. But once you get a little distance from it, and you look at it, you can figure out that there are roses that are going to bloom. And then on the other hand, you have to work at getting rid of what was unhappy about it, because you can carry around your guilt, your anger, your resentment, but then on the other hand, you can have an awakening. And I think that was important to Scott, and certainly to the students.
Huge.
And I knew Scott quite well. He was one of the reasons that I ended up coming to this program, and we were in Annick together. He taught in Annick and was my instructor there. I had wonderful times with him. Although he was a fan of classical music, he liked Pink Floyd's The Wall. We discussed that in particular because it is classical in some ways,
Yes.
and it has
Oh, yeah.
something to say. So
Yes.
he came around. Now, did you ever feel, though, after you made this change, that maybe you'd let a genie out of the bottle? You might have had some freaky guys in freaky
No.
T-shirts.
No, there were 6 or 7 names to put in the hat, and they pulled out my name. I was the first one to play rock and roll. So I went out and I came up with the Who, We Won't Get Fooled Again.
That's good trivia.
And then I followed it with, you can't always go what you want. But there was, never did we think that, oh no, it's going to be wrong. Oh, we thought it's going to be better. Every turntable was different. And it just, you just did it and did it. We just perfected ourselves, and that's it, I guess.
And what year was this specifically?
73, 74.
73.
Yes.
So, I was thinking about this is also the 50th anniversary of the Summer of Love, 1967. Yeah. But it hadn't arrived in the Midwest, right?
Right.
It arrived probably in the early 70s is when that cultural change happened here.
Well, we had a lot of Vietnam veterans. We had people who were second-time students or had delayed becoming students. They had an interest in being around here a little bit before these guys arrived in 72. So I think that there was such an interesting culture of so many different kinds of people and ideas and things that were happening. We edited tape on the reel to reel. We had racks and racks of albums. Many of them contemporary rock and roll. We couldn't even play them. They got cataloged, But these guys were playing them in the dorm or where they lived, but they weren't on the air.
Right.
Now, the other part was that after the meeting, it was not chaos, that the old format was tossed out the window. We had a new faculty director, Rich Reeder, who had been consulted before, and he's much more easygoing. But the students had created standards. When I wanted to be on the air, I had to audition. And I was critiqued. And it was very clear what I did well and what I needed to work on. And then I was allowed a certain amount of time, and for weeks I would hear from Dean or Refrick or Kevin, the station manager at the time, or program director, how to improve and what I did well and what I didn't do well. But that went throughout whether you were reading news or not. There were standards, on-air standards, that were very much maintained by each of the students. And there was a pride in that, because part of being of KV was to walk out of the station and feel proud that we had done something.
And listenership increased.
Right. Exactly.
People liked it. We were the 10 watt. We didn't have a very big signal.
Yeah.
But it did help. It helped our campus presence. We weren't just at the end of the hall in Stewart Hall. I think it was really...
Yeah, it was a good time. It really was.
Well, and each of us has taken what we've learned here and have gone professional in one way or another after leaving St. Cloud. And the foundation of being here at 10 o'clock on a Friday night instead of a party or the red carpet ingrains us with a certain ethic and a certain love of radio. The radio gene in all of us has come alive, and it's never gone away.
How did you put that to work in your professional life?
I went to work for KVSC in Grand Rapids
yes,
for
sure.
4 years.
Okay.
And then I did, 6 months KDAL TV, Scene 3 News, until they made a great decision and fired me. Best decision
We've all been fired.
anybody ever made.
But did you then pursue mass media? In some respect, that was the main part of your professional life?
Couldn't make money in mass media.
Right. Yeah. What I find is that 98% of everybody that I've met that flowed through here only went into radio for a short time, or maybe it was a little TV or maybe a little something else. But most of them have applied the communication skills, and the social skills. Right. And that dedication you were talking about, to be able to volunteer for something you believe in, that's what they took with them. even if they end up running a
and
shoe
the
company.
quality of music. You know, it was. I didn't work for a radio station. I just worked for Heilischer Brothers.
Musicland.
Musicland,
Musicland.
Sam Goody.
Okay.
And there are 1,500 stores at end. And I just went up the ranks, and I ended up being a national buyer for soundtracks and rock and roll. And it was amazing to do that and have the artists come to you, and you, instead of waiting for them to come to the other side, you know.
He has a picture in his basement of Elton John with his arm around his wife, and he's kind of left out. But yeah, and that was because music plays a role in our lives,
Yep.
and this is where the foundation of it became. And part of it is to realize that.
Well, I went on to things like marketing and communications. I worked for a filmmaker for a while after I left Channel 11. Channel 11 had such a broad, at that time, the independent station. You know, my story list wasn't limited to economics or health or anything like that. I covered just about everything there was, which was fascinating. I'm a learner. I like to learn and to capture. Someone once said to me, you know, when you write the newscast at 9:30 at night, that may be the only story that people hear, or the only way they hear that story. You know, there's a responsibility that goes along with that. At one point, I worked at the Orpheum Theater. I was a ticket manager, and then I managed the house. So I worked with traveling shows and concerts, and we had a very early Prince concert at the Orpheum Theater back in about 1979. You know, I mean, so really just the base of it. And then I got into organizational business, helping with business development. How do you market? How do you find customers? What do you do with that? And it took me into the auto auction industry, you know, which is kind of a subculture of business, I always thought. But it's enormously dynamic. It's a market indicator. Cars are sold one by one based on the value of the bidder in the lane. You know, I mean, it's sort of the stock market of cars. But, I mean, you know, it all originated in St. Cloud at the little radio station, being able to do things with people that were interesting and passionate, the things that I cared about. So, I mean, as I approach 70, you know, I think that this is a pretty wonderful place in 50 years that we're looking at right now.
What a great close. That was beautiful. I think that's it, Jim. How much time do we have?
18 minutes.
That's
Oh, wow.
okay. I was engaged the whole way through. It's
Me
a good
too.
it's a good 18
It was
minutes.
all the way.
Okay.
All the way up until the close.
You notice he doesn't
knew
have the right
close.
number on his T-shirt.
Yeah.
Yeah, 88.5.
88 point. Thank you.
Yes,
Thank you.
Oh, I remember those days. Yeah, I was here for a couple of years before I went to 88.1.
Al asked me if he thinks maybe that was the first T-shirt. I remember.
Well, it's just
Oh,
the
no.
oldest one that I know
he
of.
know
I'm sure
of,
that.
Oh.
but I remember a navy blue one that had a microphone.
Microphone and an 88.5.
Yeah, and
Absolutely.
KVSC.
That was, to my thinking, the first T-shirt.
It could have been, but they didn't have things to promote. There weren't
Right.
stickers, and we did hand things, hand drawn.
Right.
Excuse me, little slip.
They were hand drawn because you
There
couldn't
was-
make donut
He didn't
letters
hear all
unless.
of it.
There was one promotional item we had in the early 80s. It was a canned cloud. You
Yeah.
know, it was the idea, but they were in, steel cans still at that time. So they're like throwing them out in the parade and bonking people on the head.
Gosh, we did a lot of remote broadcasts. We did the homecoming parade. They did hockey, did some football.
Yep, on the
So-
Yagi.
Yeah.
Basketball that they had down in Missouri. Flew down for that, and that was
Yep.
What a thrill for
Big
yeah
deal,
to
yeah.
do that, and I'll feed
But
it up here.
at the time we were also part of radio and television. We were for a long time under the speech umbrella.
Yeah.
Yeah.
With Peeler and that crowd over there, and then Bob, what's his
Dr.
name?
John.
Dr. John DeSanto came in, and then things got the course changed, and there were more professional aspects of things and organization. There were a lot more moving parts and people. But Thank you.
Well, what I would like to do is if I could get your contact information, email address would be
Sure.
sufficient, and phone number, and then we'll let you know how this all turns out. We'll make it available to everyone. But this is sort of a missing link in the chain of the KVSC
It is.
story. I wasn't really aware of that until Joe brought it to me today and wanted me to make sure that we got.
And
this
I brought
story.
it to Joe because I was flustered because
That's a cool card.
Queen of everything.
Queen of everything.
Oh, it's a VW bus.
It is.
That's what I'm seeing.
Yep.
Okay.
I don't have mine written down.
Neither
Oh.
do I.
You know what? I've got a little. Look at me.
Look
the
at
old
you,
reporter.
yeah.
All right.
Brought
Thank
a
you.
notebook.
No, you read the website for KV, and it talks about history, and it shows pictures of people in black coats with skinny ties.
Yeah.
And then the biggest revolution has to do with somebody said, oh, we're going to play top 10, top 40 music, bubblegum music, and then they did for a while.
One for one
And
year.
somebody got really excited and they voted it out. And I thought, that's very small potatoes compared to going
There's no
from
question about Kelly's passion.
Bach, Beethoven,
You know,
and Brahms
He just
to Turner Bachman Overdrive.
Bachman Turner Overdrive. Right, Bob.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
PTO.
Yeah. Boy, that sounds
I'm now with a deep track classic rock station called The Goat, and it's the 50th anniversary of the Summer of Love, so we're going to have these events, and there's the bus that we're going to be able to use. So
Where is
your
The
bus
Goat?
gonna- It's in Sauk Rapids, Tri-County Broadcasting, but it's 107.3 FM
Okay.
is the frequency. But I mean, we go deep.
You have a
Bob.
card?
We play like Wishbone Ash.
Oh.
I'm talking Robin Trout.
How about a little Brewer and Shipley?
Oh, yeah, we play
and-
Brewer Shipley. Oh,
I worked at the Red
Jesse
Carpet
Cullen Young.
when it
One
was
top
owned
over
by
the
John
line.
Fandel, and the downstairs on the Larry Long, they had performances in the basement of the Red Carpet at the time, and it was a lot of folk, things like that, and they sang that music, and the vault was the liquor closet, and we'd have to light the fires in the fireplace.
wow. It's romantic.
Oh, it was romantic until I came off the bar one time with a Elmer Fuddpucker drink. Do you remember that name?
Yes.
It was one of those
That was a
early,
drink.
Yeah.
and it
Yeah,
had
well, no, I mean-
Galliano
Oh, okay.
and I don't know what all. But I came off and some guy bumped into me, sort of dumped it in his pants accidentally. I didn't last long as a cocktail waitress. But I'm so glad to hear about that music.
Yes. I mean, if you're a music fan of that era, I mean, we play right now a lot of music from '67 and the surrounding area. So a lot of Jefferson Airplane, Doors,
Yeah,
Grateful
yeah.
Dead. The whole San Francisco scene of that time.
Well, when I say Brewer and Shipley, there aren't a lot of people who it resonates with. But thank you for
Well, they had the one big hit, but I mean,
yeah.
okay,
It was all about Bach.
Thank you, Al.
Thank you.
Thanks for the time. It was really
bet.
nice to talk about this.
great. I'm
Yeah.
glad you enjoyed it. I really enjoyed it myself, and I wanted to be able to. I mean, I was a part of the chapter that you're talking about, and it was a big deal because what you had essentially set in motion was taken away. And so the philosophy was, and I do understand it now, the KVSC was not a good training ground for commercial radio. So what they tried to do was make it commercial radio junior. So for a year, KVSC played things like, let's say, Lionel Richie and Air Supply, and not the Rolling Stones, right? And so it was such a disappointing chapter in the station's history that even the university agreed that it wasn't going to work. So that's when they started to invest in the station, and that ultimately was the next step forward in what it became.
Can you?
But it's made of the same stuff, exactly the same stuff you were talking about. Okay?
What's that number?
Tell me about Kevin Leisure. He's a good friend of mine.
763-545-4334.
Oh, my gosh.
Really?
Oh, we love Kevin.
Yeah, he's
Yeah.
in Bellevue, Washington.
Bellevue,
Yeah,
Washington,
yeah.
with a great backyard and a waterfall.
4334.
Yeah, have you
He's such a
visited
He
him?
just went to
No,
a
I
music
haven't.
show.
763.
You what?
He just went to a big music show.
4334.
Oh,
There-
okay.
A concert of
Yep.
some kind.
All right.
They were gone
Very
for
good.
a whole weekend. And yeah, he's on Facebook. You should.
Pat?
Are you on Facebook?
I've been on Facebook with him for
yeah.
2006 or 7.
Yeah.
See, and I can't do Facebook with him and Greg Martin anymore. My blood pressure goes too high.
Gregory Martin we graduated, Gregory and Kevin and myself from Tech.
Okay,
Yeah.
got it.
Oh,
In
okay.
69.
See,
Well, I
had
was
lunch
the
with
general manager. Kevin was program manager. We had a lot of things. Okay, one little anecdote about Scott Bryce. We were invited over to his house around the holidays, and we knew his wife, but we met the kids, and she had baked cookies, and we were going to put frosting on the cookies. It was at that point we discovered Scott was colorblind.
Really?
And we were just moving into color cameras in the studio and stuff. Yeah, he was colorblind because he mixed up all these colors on these little silly cookies.
See, and he didn't hold grudges after this happened.
No.
Ah,
Okay,
no.
good. Well, he was a gentle man. He was a class act.
Yeah, it
And I
was.
know that for a fact because a year later, it was beginning of summer, he needed a TA for one of his classes. And he approached me to be a TA for his radio production class.
Yeah, I TA'd for reader.
Well, they
And amazingly enough, Scott never showed up in class. And for the next, this is how I got through school, because I wouldn't have made it as a student. For the next 2 years, I took 4 courses a quarter. I TA'd 2, and I took 2 as a student. And so no prof ever showed up in my classroom. So when it came time for my evaluation, I got to evaluate myself. So I gave myself an A, because at least for effort. So I TA'd for every, Rich and all these people. So Scott obviously could not have possibly held any grudge about that because he wanted the best.
Well, it wasn't Scott. It was the music, and that's
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
I thought
That's the
it'd be fun
distinction.
to
It wasn't
call
about
him a
Scott.
cat.
Right.
Everybody loved Scott.
I
It
thought
was
at
about
one point I
how
thought
well
we
we
should.
They started clapping. He just stopped. I walked to the edge of this stage and said, "Don't do that. Don't do that. Where the hell were you people 30, 40 years ago when we come home? All you're doing is satisfying your own bad conscience. You're not going to help me any. We buried it a long time ago. If you're so goddamn interested in vets, take care of these kids that are coming home from the sandbox.
Today, yeah.
We're losing 20 a day to suicide.
Yeah.
Be concerned about them. Do something for them." I says, "Don't worry about us Vietnam vets. We don't give a shit anymore."
Yeah.
And just dead silence. And Zach was standing behind me, just giggling. Yeah, I knew what I did. Anyway, I got voted under the Bernie caucus to the state. I'd never been through the whole caucus routine, so last year I thought I would try it all the way through and see what happened. And did that. So,
You're not going to go into politics, are you?
oh fuck no.
Okay. We ready to go, Jim? Okay. First of all, just identify yourself and what your position at KVSC was and when you were here.
My name's Bobby McGee. I'm a very close friend to Andy Marlowe. Andy and I knew each other from when he was 8 and I was 9. We were neighbors and went through elementary, high school, and I went in the Navy, submarine Navy for 4 years, come back 2 years up at Bemidji, come back here in 67, and Andy was starting the radio station. He says, "Hey, I got a job for you." So I got hooked into coming down here, and like he was saying earlier on the radio, all we had was the opera, which was we got a grant for that, so that gave us justification for being as an educational. What was it, Firestone or something like the first opera that we had, and we carried that, and then everybody just wanted us to do classical music, and Scott Bryce, which our first mentor, he says, "Well, you guys can start sampling with a little bit of this." I did 2, 3 classical shows, which is why now I know stuff about classical music, because the fact is I didn't know anything, so I'd pick a whole stack of classical music, and then as the show was going on, I'd read the shucks. So I got a whole education on classical music by opening up the shucks and reading what they had to say about this piece of music. And then to get a little brace, I started the first jazz show, and I think it was either 10:30 to 12 or 11, long time ago, but it ended at 12 o'clock. And the game was to get the national anthem on, shut the whole place down, totally down. So the last thing was to shut the light off and shut the board down and shut the tape deck down. And then I had 12 minutes to get to the press bar because it was getting close to last call. And then Andy had set up about 5-6 drinks for me. So it was always a run to get from here to the radio station.
12 minutes.
12 minutes.
Okay.
It was interesting because, like, I don't know what you know, the wire service we had, that thing made so much noise we couldn't keep it up into the studio that we had up there in 140 because it was just too noisy. So they lent us a closet just a few doors down from the stage in Stewart Hall. So when you had to do the news and you're on alone, you set something on it, it just gave you 5-6 minutes of play, run down the hall, pull wire copy, and read it as you're going back down the hall and tear out what you wanted, sit down, and do the news right off the wire service. So you had to go pick up the news way down the hall at Super Hall.
Kept you in good shape between running for the news and running to the bar. You must have been in good shape.
I was a lot younger in those days. Much easier. But that's it. And this is the original board.
So the reason we want to set up here is because this was a functional board. This is the board, the actual board that the station used.
The board we started on.
Take me through the moves of like doing a shift.
Well, you had either on, off, or neutral. If you wanted to cue something, you'd cue it. Like on the tape deck, you'd take the tape deck and kind of turn it like this until you got a squeak, 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 squeak.
Okay.
Then you put a piece of paper in it because it was reel to reel. That was the only way we do our cues was by a piece of paper. So we put a piece of paper and that was where the cue was. And then you'd have pieces of paper going around inside it. That was you'd work your whole show that way. If you ran out of pieces of paper, you were done. It was that simple. But then you just cue it, put it on aux, then you'd hear it in the studio speakers. Then you just put it back to here, and then when the spot come on, then you'd cue it. And I think you had a punch button up behind here. You'd punch the tape deck, and it would start playing. And of course, you'd control your volume down there, and you'd see if you were in the marks there. But this is a board, and we had the turntables. We had 2 turntables on here. This is the mic. I think this is remote 1.
Well, this would be turntable 1, turntable 2 here.
Yeah, that's there.
And then did you take live calls? It says phone here. Did you have the phone hooked in?
Oh, yeah, we'd take phone calls. That was fun.
I suppose.
No censor in those days.
Mm-hmm.
But this is the original board we worked on. And the person who wired this is a guy by the name of Elvin Siegel. Okay. He put together the first broadcast board, the stuff that put it on the air. And Alvin was a guy that designed computers for Carnegie Mellon Technical Institute back in the days. He came and he was our first engineer, our first certified engineer. And a story on that, I saw him. We were working on getting ready to broadcast, and he had the board for the broadcast. They actually sent the signal on, and he put maximum voltage on this side, burned about 4 or 5 things on the board, measured the output. Oh, that's close enough. Boom. And we went on the air. It was originally 88.5, yes. And the reason it went to 88.1 is because we were bouncing up against a station in the city. So then it became 88.1. And we had this board, 2 turntables, those big old turn. Same thing. You cued them with going sure. Like that. And it was, everything we were doing was just brand, we didn't know what doing. We were all a bunch of dummies. You just bunch of recovering hippies. How's that?
A bunch of recovering hippies.
Yeah.
Okay.
If I'd known I was going to live this long, I'd have taken better care of my body.
Sure.
But yeah, it was right in there. The campus was rioting in that time. This is 67, 68, 69. There was all kinds of things, and we were kind of the spokesman that got. Now the original broadcast, we were lucky if we got off campus. Our signal was so small.
It was 10 watts.
10 watts. We just barely got past Stewart or one of the dorms out there. And then they start jacking it up there. We had to get permission from the dorm director to go up and adjust the antenna because it was a girls' dorm. You know?
Oh, wow.
But-
That's interesting. So most of the people at the station were guys. And
Yeah.
so for a guy to go adjust the antenna
Well,
in a girl's door.
Elvin was a certified engineer. He was a certified engineer for broadcasting and everything else. So he did all the work on that. And there was a guy by the name of Terry Peterson who later followed. He kept working for 20 years trying to figure out what Elvin did. Elvin never did anything by the book. It was maximum voltage about this point. Hey, enough power come out on this, and I guess I did it right. So if the FCC would have come in and checked our boards and everything, we'd have been off the air in no time because there was nothing according to the book that was done in those days.
I
But
love it.
E. Scott Bryce, Jim Peeler, Gary Hawkins, and all those guys then start bringing some continuity and bringing it together and getting it all working out right. We almost became professional at that time, you know.
Almost.
But you figure it was in a room. The whole studio was no bigger than this here.
Right.
You know what we were operating.
Howdy, folks.
And it was interesting because we were all amateurs, just strictly amateurs. But we learned, and like I said on the air just a little while ago, I am so proud that we got KVSC going, and that these kids over the years have made it into what is a very class operation, something to be proud of.
I
But
agree.
that's the baby it started on.
Glad we still have it.
Yeah,
Isn't that great?
I'm surprised they kept it because this is an antique because it was an antique when we got it. I don't know where. You might ask Andy where we got it, but it was stolen from some other place or pulled out of some radio station. They gave us this.
Yeah, this could have been garbage in 1967.
Yeah, it
and
could
it's
have
still
been
here today.
Yeah, and we pulled it out and got it set up and running, and it worked. We had many good years out of it, but it just funnier and all get out because it was all toggles, all switches, hand operating and things like that. And
Sometimes you hit it and it starts working.
oh yeah,
right.
it was
Well, Bob, one more thing. What is it about your experience at KVSC that you would say impacted your life? What was something you took with you?
well. I had about 3 majors, I think. They were philosophy. I had a full major in philosophy, full major in history, but I had conned the graduation department to give me a BS in radio and television. So I was the first person to come out of this college with a BS, which means I could teach radio and television. That was one of my majors. I was the first one to come out of here with a BS in radio and television, and then I had a minor in theater and education credits. But because I was the one that set up the whole television studio over in Atwood. They moved me over there, and Scott Bryce and Jim Peeler and the Hawk. We got that going and put together so we could broadcast live television from there. We were doing the first, and then I did a program. Jim Peeler and he was, in other words, to broadcast. We couldn't broadcast from here, so we went down to Channel 2 down there, the educational channel down in the cities, and we had a canned show, and I was his engineer, and we did the show down there, brought it back here, but it was the first KVSC show to be broadcast from down there because we didn't have the television broadcast, so we'd go down to, what was it, Channel 2? What was the educational channel at the time? I don't remember, but it was the one station out of there. We did a show remote from there, did that for one whole fall quarter, and every drive down the cities, get everything set up down there. But yeah, it was interesting. We were doing a lot of innovative stuff. Nobody ever did, you know. We were the groundwork, you know. Like I said, it's I learned my education on classics from reading the inside of Shucks.
Yeah, right.
You know, that's where it all happened because none of us had any background in classical music, but we learned as we went, you know. I had fun with the jazz show because I had a background in jazz. When I was in the Navy, I was out in San Francisco and used to hang in I was summary and say, but when we were in San Francisco, I used to hang around the jazz clubs up there. So I had a good background and knew what was out there, and we would start getting more and more records, and I brought a lot of them from home and played, and that was our first show, Jazz After Hours, I think it was.
Jazz After Hours.
I don't know.
I seem to remember that title when I first got here. I think
yeah,
that was
Jazz
still going.
After Hours, I think is what we named it, so there you go.
So if KVSC were a person and you were to wish that person happy birthday, what would you say?
I'm so glad you made it this long. we're all old. Andy and I are the same age. We won't talk about that. But when I'm out teaching and kids say, "How old are you?" I said, "I'll give you my exact birthday. I was born 1 year to the date that the 6th Marine landed on Guadalcanal, and I was 2 years old between Hiroshima and Nagasaki." That gives you my birth date. Okay,
Yeah.
the exact date. But it was interesting because, like I say, it was the days of the revolutions. The hippies were all over. I think Andy was at the Democratic convention in '68, and I also know he went to a May Day rally out in Washington, and so there was a lot of the protest people were also involved in KVSC. So it was a live and very lively group. And the place that Andy lived was called the Palace Flop House. It was where the old Coburns were. And the Palace Flop House comes in reference to John Steinbeck. And all the drinks were served in pint jars. So it come out of John Steinbeck. But we had a good crew. It was fun to be there and running into them. Like I said, I listen to KVSC all the time. And it's a good station. I enjoy it very, very much, and glad that I could be a part of it many, 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 many years ago. And I gave you my birthday so you know how many years ago. How's that?
All right.
Good
Thank
enough?
you, Bob. That's great.
Did that give you what you wanted?
Yes,
on this
I
old baby?
really, most of all, what I wanted was someone who had actually laid hands on this board in the time.
I gotta ask Andy where we got that, because I think it was handed to us from.
Okay.
Not Andy Better.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, I saw him last night briefly.
Yeah, he's mentioned that he saw you.
He's quick.
So we came down here.
And you got the missus with you?
No, she didn't want to come to this for some reason. She wasn't feeling like leaving the house.
Beautiful wife is Carolina, stayed with him all these years. We always consider she should be.
You're a Mountain Dew guy.
For saying that Yahoo.
Saw your daughter last night.
Caitlin? Oh.
She is.
You're getting a pretty good turnout here.
Yeah, it looks that way.
I can't comprehend the idea that there's no coffee here. Will you give me the coffee?
Make a stick on my shirt. So,
Who's the coffee director?
There's coffee over there. Yeah.
There should be coffee that way.
Yeah, there's coffee
There
that
should
way.
be coffee here too.
Yeah.
Thank you.
there you are. There I am. Are you in this one?
No, that was the year before I came.
Oh, okay.
So
Well, that's you there?
that's me there.
That's you. Sure.
That is me. And then I think I'm up in that one too.
Is that you again?
No, it's the one in the striped dress.
Oh, see, I was here
Oh,
that
I'm
year.
sorry. Oh, okay.
You before.
Does that look like me?
Sure.
Apropos to bring it up for this occasion.
Yeah, I got old grandma shorts like that, you know.
We all do. What's your name?
And me.
Hi, Ed.
Mike's
Met
dad.
you a
Mike
long
May's
time
dad.
ago.
Oh, Mike's dad.
Yeah.
Yeah, I met you a long time ago up in Winnipeg.
Oh, well.
And,
I was doing mushrooms up there.
I love sharing my story. I love this real quick with my story. Because I was involved.
You seen it?
Iconography into the blocks that Kelly designed. So it's not. It is not finished. This is hours and hours and hours of work.
Yes.
But there is no chance that this is the full vision. Okay. And the thing about that is, I think it better represents KVSC anyways, in the sense that KVSC is completely unfinished.
Of course. That's the metaphor I was going for.
Yeah, and it's like I had even at one point in time was like figuring out what kind of like modern imagery could have been fit in there. Microphones, records, different tools of the trade, so to speak.
Sure.
So I find the empty boxes disconcerting.
Okay. But isn't it comforting that it is unfinished, just like the station? We've got a long road behind us and a long road ahead. You know,
I'm still proud of it in the sense that whenever I see somebody, take a picture of it, it doesn't upset me that that's the representation that they pick for KV. It's also the case that there are multiple dimensions to this, okay? And again, it goes back to this unfinished business, right? But when we designed the first KVSC bumper sticker, we used a transmitter tower design that's similar to this transmitter. So
and
that
with the lightning bolts was a part of that too.
Right, but it's a much larger
Let's
amount.
find out what she thinks. Do you like this picture?
Yeah.
What do you like about it?
About that,
Yeah. Do you know what that is?
a windmill.
It's a radio tower, and so electricity comes out of it that turns into sound, and that's why you can hear the radio, just like we hear over there.
Yeah.
Isn't that crazy? Like it goes up. He says something into a microphone like this, and it goes up that tower and comes out the top. And you
Comes
can't
out
actually
there.
see the lightning bolts, but they're there. And then it comes out of the speaker, like right behind you, out of the stereo.
Yeah.
That's cool.
And it's not like you can go outside and listen to the sounds going through the air either. That's the magic of radio.
That is the magic. You need the magic box
Yes,
to turn it
indeed.
back into what it started out to be.
And I wonder if these are a representation actually of a magic box.
The magic box. I
So,
like it.
It begins with Kelly Anderson, and I can't recall his on-air name.
Bjorn Orange.
Very good. He started with a very crazy, I think it's an oil-based wash, and it turned out to be, then he mixed these various colors into a splash, and he was doing a kind of a, like a modern art feel to this wall, okay? And it then was, what else are we going to do to adorn it? And we developed a black lettering style for the letters K, V, S, and C, which were put down in another oil-based, more of a smear quality in the original level. And then I was brought in to do more of the filling in definition, whatnot. And so like the small pointillist squares, the various, I don't know what you'd call them, flares, whatnot, the transmitter tower. That's the part that I actually contributed to. And being the fact that I was working days and didn't have a lot of time on my hands, I remember coming in late nights on weekends, and I had cans of regular industrial house paint. As you can see, it's black, blue, red, white. I didn't do a lot of mixing, just banged them in there. I think these greens might have been various blends of blue and yellow, but they came from primaries, and I was asked to add a little bit of definition to it. So really my work in this is minimal, though the standout part of the transmitter tower, though I feel is a bit flawed, and not, I'll leave it at that. I don't like the circular white part of it that represents the waves of radio. I wish I would never have attempted that, and that was something I wasn't very proud of. Well, it just ended up that my life changed fairly completely by the time Kelly came back and started designing the cube shapes with the black and the lines here. and like, to go back around, it was going to be my cue to develop radio and industry and music iconography. And, it could have been everything from Husky sports to news
So this
to
was your
music.
aspiration professionally? Was
To paint?
Well, to
No.
provide iconography.
My aspiration to this amateur piece of artwork that has lived to today and has never been scraped off or covered up by anybody,
Although
loved and still appreciated,
Yes.
was to try to finish it with something that deeper represented KVSC on a less than abstract level.
Right. And this was almost painted over, because the situation at the time, as you'll remember, it was around the time of the big neighborhood garage sale.
Indeed.
And I did a trade out for some of the paint that you used. I got a deal through a paint store, and basically wasn't this a kind of an FU to the powers that be of the university?
Right.
We just decided to do it.
Right.
Right.
And it wasn't that long after we came into this new studio.
Right.
As that stands.
Yes.
And of course, pristine walls and whatnot.
Yeah, the university never imagined this in this space.
Exactly. But didn't we petition to have that happen?
No,
Originally?
No, I think we did that after. We sort of said, please let us keep it.
Keep it.
But I came up with the paint. I said, you guys go at it, and you went at it. And then I remember guys in like suits and ties coming down with clipboards and looking at it, like really straight people, and then writing on pieces of paper and then going away. And we thought, well, that's it.
Oh my Lord.
That's it. We figured, Kevin and I thought they're going to send a crew in and they're going to wipe this out.
Yeah.
It could happen any time, and it just never happened. It's amazing to sit here today, now 26 years later.
Yeah, but on top of it, I think it represents a lot of different parts of the relationship of St. Cloud State to KVSC as well, and the long-standing power, love, and respect that Joe has had
Yes.
in the position here. She never knocked anything down, and I know that if it were on the agenda to be knocked down, it would be really low on the agenda. There are so many other activities that mean more.
Well, now it's become a treasured symbol. You can't imagine the station without this being here.
Absolutely.
And yet at the time, it was pretty out there.
I know, but weren't we always out there?
I think so.
Yeah.
As it should be.
Indeed.
Same as it ever was.
Indeed.
All right.
Peas and carrots.
Peas and carrots. Imagine world peas. Thanks, Andy.
Indeed.
That was cool.
Thank
you
you.
taught me some things I didn't know about this, and I didn't know how strongly you felt about it being an unfinished work.
Oh,
So,
yeah.
when the time is right. Here's
No.
something I thought about asking, and I wasn't sure if I should. Is Kelly okay? What
Who
happened
knows?
with Kelly? Don't know.
No idea.
I don't
I wish he and Campbell were here.
Where's Campbell?
Yeah, I know Campbell's had hard times.
Go ahead. Give us your name and your level of involvement here.
Into action.
Okay. To get started. To get started, just tell us your name and your level of involvement, your position here at KVSC.
My name is Trevor Klopp. Was involved for 4 years at the station, started in 2011. I was training director, program director for 2 years, did some production work, a whole lot of on-air.
And then later you were a program director, which is kind of the top student position.
Yeah, it was the top student position, and I thought I would hate it because I didn't want to have to deal with schedules. I didn't want to have to deal with, people and making phone calls all the time. I was kind of an introvert, and it totally broke me of that. I had to make phone calls. I had to organize events. I had to be the face for the station for remotes. And so in a good way, it forced me to break out of my shell and to meet a lot of new people, to be more outgoing, to be creative, to plan events, which I had no experience in.
Mm-hmm. It's kind of a common thread, and it's ironic to some people that a lot of people that go into radio are shy. And I would include myself. I knew I had something to say, but I needed to hide behind the microphone. But eventually, radio forces you to get out from behind the microphone.
Yeah, there's a big difference between sitting in a room alone with a mic and talking to thousands of people versus standing in front of thousands of people, with everyone's eyes on you. So I think, too, there's a lot to that, being an introvert and being involved in radio. I definitely was. Still kind of am.
Yeah. But you can come over to the other side when need be, right?
Absolutely, yeah. I'm not afraid of a stage or a mic.
Right,
No.
okay. So, as far as the impact that KVSC had on your life, that was something that gave you sort of a personal quality, another tool in your belt. But in terms of, what you envision yourself doing with radio, what do you think the biggest impact was?
The biggest impact as far as what I did in radio was I gotta think about that. Well, probably the production side of things. So production work is definitely my strong suit, and St. Cloud State helped me KVSC more than any class I ever took on its own. I had to understand the difference between a sweeper and a long-form interview. The idea of saying something in 8 seconds versus saying something in 20 minutes, and knowing how to edit down a long-form interview, or knowing how to make something great in 6 seconds. So part of it was content editing, part of it was understanding how to work waveforms and produce audio, make something sound great, or to fix audio from a bad interview. And that's something I carry through to my job today. I work full-time doing production work. So absolutely KVSC prepared me for that.
Yeah. Now, a lot of people that went through KVSC, to my experience, I would say 95% didn't go into radio. You've chosen that at least that's going to be part of your professional life. How do you think that KVSC would mold you in that respect?
A big part of it, again, was production work. So having done production work here, I was prepared to edit things quickly and keep up with the fast pace of a large market like Minneapolis with the volume that we take in. And part of it, too, is the offshoot of KVSC, which was Radio X. I had a hand in creating that, all of the branding and imaging and production work for that, plus the experience of being able to be on air in a commercial style, to really bring my energy up, to understand voice tracking and how that works, to have to get your point across in 20 seconds or less was totally, an un-KVSC kind of mindset to have, and definitely prepared me for, working in commercial radio.
Yeah. Now, Radio X, talk a little bit about this concept. Some people might not know there's a few outgrowths really of KVSC, but that's becoming one of the more popular ones.
Yeah, Radio X is 97.5. It's a low-power FM. Myself, Jesse Wheeler, and Jim Gray were the figureheads that put it together. We got the license through the university to have this low-power FM. It's an alt-90s format, some hits, a lot of deep cuts, really great music. And the big way that it differs from KVSC is that it is voice-tracked. So there's no live element to it at all. And it's also different in that you have to have that commercial style. So you have to have more energy, more punch, and short breaks, versus KVSC, which is more conversational, that long form. So for me and other students who have been on that station, it prepares you in a different way for the real world if you end up in commercial radio.
Right. And that's the balance, to try to prepare people for a career in broadcasting if that's their desire, and still be a community-based resource for people that simply would like to provide a voice. Could be music, it could be social issues, it could simply be, I think I have something to say, and it gives them the chance to say it.
Yeah, KVSC is beautiful for that. The number of local bands that I found who were nobodies in some basement and I ended up loving, or have gone on to do great things in central Minnesota and beyond. Yeah, I've discovered them at KVSC. Important political and social justice topics that don't get covered anywhere else get a voice at KVSC. Myself, the guy to my right, the gal 2 years from now who will be on air, have a voice on this community station, but just by putting in the time and being involved with a great group of people.
And finally, talk about that. How's it affected sort of like your personal life? I carried I would even say most of, the best, closest friends I have in my life experience have come in some way from this hub.
Hands down. My best friends are from my time in school, and some of them are from classes that I had. But my best friends are from KVSC. The people that I come back to see for trivia, the people that I'm seeing here on the 50th birthday celebration, these are my friends and my family. It's a family reunion, when we get together. Hugs everywhere and laughs and jokes, and yeah, the KVSC people are the best.
One more thing, if KVSC were a person and you wish that person happy 50th birthday, about what would you say?
Happy birthday, KVSC. Happy frickin' birthday, man. Keep it up. 50 more. Here we go.
That's good. Nice and tight. Well done. Thanks, Trevor.
Thanks, Al.
Cool. We had pretty good representation last night of our Super Radio team.
Yeah.
We had Eric and Andy and you and me. And I even invited Scooter to maybe join in with us.
Okay. I figured he would... I don't think it's been used yet.
Why don't you first off just tell us who you are and what positions you have occupied here at KVSC?
My name is Zach G. Asfadel. I have been since 1994 the host of the Undercurrents Punk Rock Show, and did a lot of other shows at KVSC over time, but that's the one that's the staying power. 22 years and counting. So.
Wow. Like a lot of people thought when punk rock, kind of became a popular thing, it's like, oh, that's going to be a flash in the pan. That the music itself would end, let alone a guy like you that puts in 22 years promoting it. What's up?
It's interesting because the waves of popularity. My show is called Undercurrents. It was started by a guy who was the music director at the time and didn't know the music well, but recognized that because of what he was finding under the other things in the collection, that was really the thing. It was always going to be there, one way or another. And then, like in '94, when things became '92 to '94, that period, Rancid and a lot of other bands kind of brought it back out again. It had always been there since the late '70s, as in that under that name, punk rock. But really, it's like, it stretches back into the '60s and '50s, even, really, the whole rock and roll thing. So I always looked at it as the waves of popularity over the undercurrent of punk rock that's always going to be there, and that attitude was really more about it. So my show is always all about the attitude.
Right.
It's about what the people are doing. What do you call punk rock? I mean, and everybody defines it a little bit differently, but it has the common thread of rebellion and extreme thought, and very careful approach to what you're doing, with loud guitars. Not always, though. There are some interesting, not so loud things that I like, and I call punk rock as well.
I think that you, Zach, to my experience of you, are sort of a metaphor of punk rock, because when I met you, you were a wacky-looking cat. You had a lot of studs on all your clothes, and you had a purple mohawk, or it might be a green mohawk the next day. You were a freaky-looking dude.
Yes,
but you always carried yourself with a certain sense of intelligence and grace. And look at you now. You've got a name badge and a nice shirt. But you still got that belt, too.
Well,
so.
It's all about art. And that's the thing. And I would say that's my appearance at the time was, I remember it was a direct reaction to a lot of the people that said, well, you're this intelligent guy, you should do this and this and this. And my family and my parents and whatever, my peers and whatnot, all thought that I should be a certain way. So in a lot of ways it was like, no, I shouldn't be any sort of particular way. I want to be however I am. And I appreciate the recognition, because that's a very good big compliment coming from somebody like yourself, who I think has also carried himself in such a way. I mean, you're a rock and roll guy that has always been like, but there's a what's the word I'm looking for? Not educational, but there's an approach to it that's more than just the music and more than just an attitude that is just, it's like you said, a flash in the pan. It's not that. I mean, rock and roll is pervasive and has a meaning that goes deeper, and that's, for me, the punk rock was that niche that I clung to for a long time. It was my religion. It was my informative way of being part of society. It was like, hey, this is kind of how my community of people does things, and so that's where my jumping point came from. So really, punk rock was kind of a way for me to start questioning what was happening around me in the world and finding my own way through it. So it became a springboard, and then later became something to me that I could define and I could help move in a different direction. Now that I'm part of it, I feel like, it's like I am going from a devotee to, in some ways, more of a teacher, so.
Well done. They grow up so fast. I wonder what would have happened with a guy like you had you not had the incubator, like in your young life of a place like this. What if you would have grown up in, I don't know, Des Moines?
I have said this many times, and I will give you a very short timeline, but from about '88, when I started listening, I thought, wow, this is amazing. This is music that I've never heard anywhere else, and it's, again, kind of an undercurrent. It was the undercurrent of what was happening at the time. I started listening to underground punk rock through a couple of people that they saw me dressing differently and thought that I was into this music, and I wasn't at the time. So they introduced me to this stuff, and I said, wow, that fits me. So from there, I moved into, coming down here, listening from about '88 to about '93, '94, and finally decided, after a number of people said, you should do that, it'd be fun, you can train. I came in, I trained in, and I thought, wow, this is perfect, because the collection was here, and a lot of stuff was, haphazard and not complete, and so I was able to kind of fill in some gaps myself and draw in things like that. But having this as a common point absolutely propelled me. There's no question that KVSC was, I would not be where I am, and I would not know the things that I know without KVSC, because it was a way for me to get in touch with others and have a common point that they could come back to from out of state, out of town, out of the country. And I made connections to bands as far as Argentina and Asia and things like that brought it here, and I was able to then broadcast it from here, and so to have this as a reason to do it, not just to listen to it, but to share it. And that was a drive. For me to share it was a big drive. It's like, yeah, listening to it was entertaining and good for me and it was inspiring. But the fact that I knew I could then turn potential, 1.6 million people in our listening range, I was like, that's amazing. I can share this with this many people. And just the fact that I knew that I could teach people about it and do it in a way that meant something. In public educational radio, I thought, what the hell, There's nothing better than that idea to me. It's like the public needs to be educated on things that they don't understand. Whether they like them or not, that's their choice to decide.
Right.
So for me, it was a mission to do that kind of pedagogical approach, I guess you could say, to punk rock, and still, but,
I talked to one of our former colleagues. I'm not sure if he was part of your generation, but he's not in radio anymore. And he's like, it sucks when I find a song that I really like. All I can do is play it again, but you get to push a button that brings it out to the cosmos, wherever it lands.
And that's a big part of it too, is like those moments where you think no one's listening, they're not real. There's always somebody out there. Somebody has it tuned in or has it in the background. It's always going to make an impression. It's always going to be heard. And to me, that's what keeps me going. That's a big part of it again. Yeah, I can listen to it again myself. And yeah, I enjoy music on my own. And in the quieter times of myself, might listen to something that, just I want to listen to. But there are those moments where I listen to a song and one of my first thoughts is, I'm going to play this next week on my show.
Right.
I have to play this. I have to have other people hear this. I have to share this and tribute the bands that are doing this stuff.
Right.
That's their effort isn't on, they're doing it for a reason too. So I want to help them with that mission.
So if KVSC were a person and you were to wish that person a happy 50th birthday, what would you say?
Well, I mean, as a punk rocker, to quote Bob Dylan might be strange, but forever young. That's what KVSC does for me, and I'm thinking that's what it does for so many people that listen and are part of it, because it just keeps us fresh, and it's always something new, and it keeps us forever young. So I would say that happy birthday, KVSC. Thanks for keeping me forever young.
Well done, Zach. He's good, isn't he? Yeah. That was fun, right? And I knew you'd do it. You're good at that. Who knows? Maybe Joe would have a purpose for this, even though it's not directly KVSC. Okay, having
funny.
ascended to, you're now working for the SCSU
Yes,
Foundation.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I work as the Associate Development Officer, which is one of those titles that nobody knows what it means out of context, so it's kind of funny. They're like, development, what, like photos? I work, photo, no. Fundraising is it's a job that nobody wants to be in from the time they're a kid, like, I want to grow up and be a fireman, I want to be a police officer, whatever, those things. But as a person with passion for something, fundraising to me is it's not a dirty word. A lot of people think of it as, you ask people for money, you beg for money, those things. And I say, well, if that's what you're doing it wrong. And you don't belong in fundraising. And the idea for me was always that I found a passion, and that's, again, teaching people things. So I raise money here in the educational setting, KVSC being a very large part of that. To me, the mass communications department in general is doing phenomenal work, and I love to support it. And for me, again, KVSC, obviously I have a passion for KVSC, so raising money by showing people what is possible to be done with that fund, those funds are it's not just money, it's not about the money, it's about what the funds do. It's really about what the effect is that everybody pulling together and pooling together is going to go. How it's going to go forward and show students what they can do and take it to the next level. And again, that teaching thing, it's like, you can't teach if the students aren't able to be here. So for me, the fundraising education part of it, the educational fundraising part of it is absolutely necessary. I mean, we can go on, I can talk about all kinds of things, state funding dropping and all those sorts of things and how education is changing and whatnot. But the bottom line is I make it possible to add to an education and enhance that education some way or another. So that to me is, there's no more noble thing, I think, than to help somebody get an education and do what they do. It's just like, I feel like, I'm super lucky to be doing what I do because I get to help people to where they want to be. So, and I could get misty-eyed over it. I just, so.
I think even Johnny Rotten would resonate with that. We had the beautiful little girl. Did you see her around? She's about 3 or 4 years old, and she was mystified with the radio tower. We did a short interview, and I hope that there's a time when she can come here and be on the air at KVSC. It's not that far away. That could happen in 15 years,
or less. We actually had Carl Leslie, one of our regular hosts now. His son Zach trained in at age 12. I think it was 11 or 12, started on the air, and he was like, by the time he was 14, he was a pro. So, I mean, we've seen it, somebody with a passion for it, loved music, wanted to learn how to work it, came in with his dad and learned the ropes, and, he was co-hosting with Carl for years, and so I think she could be absolutely groomed for a good time here. If not a career, then certainly a passion or a hobby or something to do. So
Let's go give her a cupcake.
I think we should. She deserves it.
All right. Thanks, Zach. We seem a little bit far apart. We don't have to have the full view.
And
Can we stand just a
also,
little closer?
don't fondle the mic.
Don't fondle.
Well, that only leaves me with one other prop, Jim.
I'm out of here.
Oh, no, come on back, Wayne.
That's more than I needed
back.
to know.
Okay.
That's more than I wanted to experience.
Let me know when we're rolling.
I'm ready.
Okay. Well, this time we have, I would say, of any two guys that have been at the radio station, we are the two old hippies. And we were the whole hippies 25 years ago.
Yes.
Go ahead and just tell us who you are and what you did during your peak time at KVSC.
Oh. Well, my name is Wayne Bergerson. I shouldn't be talking to the microphone. I should be talking to that, shouldn't I?
No, you should be talking to me.
Talking to you.
Right.
Okay. Now you can edit that if you like, or just let it run. I don't care. Okay.
Here we go.
Now you're on.
Okay. Of any two guys at KVSC, I think we would be known, fondly I hope, as the old hippies. And that started probably 25 years ago.
Yes.
And here we are again today, 50th birthday.
Yep.
Tell us who you are and what you have done at KVSC.
Well, my name is Wayne Bergerson, and I guess I'm most notoriously known, for creating and hosting the Frets program and keeping that on the air for nearly 30 years, which is folk and bluegrass music. Something that in my life that I'm very proud of being a part of. But another part of it too is something you and I did together for quite a number of years, and that's the classic rock program. And we were doing that back when people looked at us, the old hippies, back before classic rock became a radio genre and a radio programming thing. We were doing classic rock and keeping the music alive and adding our spin to it. And even when you listen to those stations today, many of them aren't playing the songs or the artists that were considered to be classic rock artists. They're the top 40 chart artists of album rock, but they're not the actual music or what would be considered the classic songs that influenced the other artists. So, that's another thing that I really enjoyed and I'm proud of being part of with KVSC.
You know, another thing that we did is all these albums behind,
yes.
we patched up those albums.
Oh, yes.
We took like weeks and
Yep.
went through thousands of albums and
Yep.
repaired the covers and the sleeves.
Repaired covers and sleeves. Yes, we took care of the vinyl. And we also weeded out some of the things that, should have never been committed to vinyl, but were. And somehow they made it to the station. Well, every radio station receives albums like that.
We had limited shelf space.
Yes, limited shelf space. So we had to do a little bit of a judicious cutting at that time.
Now, here's what I really wanted to talk to you about, because I feel that you were sort of a linchpin between two different eras of the station. I was already here when you arrived, which I believe was 1983 when you first came here? Okay. And we had sort of a cultural crisis here at KVSC at that time. And there was a year where KVSC became essentially a top 40 station. In a college radio format, and you were one of the very few who sort of transcended those, you crossed that line, and thereby when the station changed again back to its alternative format, there was some continuity.
Yeah. Well, I'd like to say that I did that for altruistic means, but in all seriousness, I saw it as my opportunity to just basically stick thorns in people's sides, I enjoyed being here at that time because I was doing radio. It wasn't the type of radio that I preferred doing, which I got to do later. But I also, when I was on the air, would make little jabs and little, do little things here and there, just to let the current management at that time know that maybe they were doing something wrong. Whether it was playing a song that they did not authorize, which at commercial stations I got fired for later on too. I've always done that. I think I honed that ability during that period. But also, as I've been saying to other people around here, I've known of and been listening to in KVSC for the whole 50 years.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, you are a product of St. Cloud.
Yes, I'm a product of St. Cloud. And it was through Jim Peeler and his work with WJON and the original Radio Guild that became KVSC. And they're working on a fundraiser for the Big Brothers Little Sisters. Or there was no Little Sisters program at that time. It was just the Big Brothers program. I was a little brother that took and donated something to the auction that WJON and KVSC had done at that time, with Jim Peeler being one of the announcers. And it sold for just this crazy amount of money, in the auction, because it was donated by one of the little brothers. In fact, I was the third little brother in St. Cloud to be signed up for that program.
Wow.
So, that meant a lot to somebody. So Jim Peeler showed up with, some of the WJON equipment to do a little, interview, and one of the newspaper reporters and this person at my house, and it was just a little model car that I made, and I was proud of, and I wanted to see if maybe I could help out, the Little Brothers program. And Jim showed up, and they did a small little thing with us about that. So,
So you were on the radio as a child.
Yeah.
About how old do you think?
I would have been 8 or 9 years old.
Wow.
And so, because I knew he was with KVSC, I've always been kind of beholden to KVSC, because here was this radio guy that was actually paying attention to me and actually treating me like a real person. And I was a little kid, and he was treating me like a real. So, I immediately fell in love with the station. I don't even know if Jim remembers that, but it made an impression on me.
We'll make sure he sees this. That's great.
So
in a way, coming to KVSC was almost part of your destiny.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, I knew at that point in time there was some way or another I was going to, at least see the studios of KVSC. A little bit later on in years with KVSC. Hope you don't mind me rambling here a second.
Well, we do have to be conscious of time, as you know. It's the same thing. Yeah, I heard you on the air earlier today, and you said I've been known to be a little long-winded, but you know that.
Yes, but there's one other little historical little story. Back when I was working for Rick Nolan's election campaign when he got elected to Congress, and late nights I would be listening to KVSC at that time. And that's when they were, still playing progressive rock, which was now classic rock. But there was an announcer on it. I still haven't seen, I wouldn't know because I never knew her real name. But there was an announcer on the air by the name of Michelle Diamond, is what she used on the air. I never learned her real name and never learned what her face was like. But to me, she had the sexiest voice of any announcer around. So it just kept me listening to KVSC. So I ended up here roundabout because of all things like this. So it all wraps up, into a 50-year odyssey, of which I was part of it for 30 years.
Right. I like that, a 50-year odyssey. And it's a long, strange trip.
Yes.
So let me ask this. What do you think has been KVSC's major contribution to your life experience? Let me ask the opposite question. What do you think your major contribution has been to KVSC?
I like the first one better, but I'll answer them both.
All right.
I'll answer them both. KVSC, I entered it as an announcer when I needed something important in my life. And at that point in my life, it gave me something to hold on to and became something very important to me. And in return, I would like to think that I became something very important to KVSC during the time I was here. It gave me direction and meaning when I needed it. And then it just gave me, after I didn't need it anymore, it just gave me vast amounts of pleasure because of all the experiences, all the people, all the music I have learned and been a part of and met. I can't think of something more important in my life than being involved with KVSC. Now, my contribution to KVSC is still on the air right now as far as I'm concerned. And it's still going strong. There are people that still enjoy it, and that's the Frets program and the legacy of that. I never thought when I began it I would create a legacy, but this morning I found out that I have. I created something wonderful, and that makes me very, very proud.
That was fucking beautiful, man. That was great. Yeah, you sounded good too. I listened, and you still smoke cigarettes?
Yeah.
I can't hardly imagine you not smoking cigarettes, but your vocal tone, you still, you haven't deepened that much. It still sounds exactly like you.
Well, that's good.
Yeah.
That's good.
Wow.
Yeah.
If KVSC were a person, how would you say happy birthday to KVSC?
Happy 50th anniversary, KVSC. And even though you may not be able to see it, if I was talking to a person, I'd say I hope you see 50 more and make it to 100. I never want to see you go. And I always want to see you being who you are and what you are and doing exactly what you're doing because you got it right.
All right. I like it. Yeah. I also want to do a little testimony here. This man survived for decades on. I never saw him eat food. He ate a cookie once in a while. Otherwise, it was coffee.
Yep.
Before we did the interview, he went to get some coffee.
Yep.
Coffee and cigarettes, and he just kept on moving.
Yep.
Incredible stamina.
Well, in honesty, I'm the truth. In truth, I am the product of caffeine, nicotine, and junk food. And that's what's kept me alive. That's what kept my voice figure all these years.
That's right.
And good cigarettes and bad whiskey will help too.
Yeah, but kids don't try that at home.
No, not in today's day and age. Nah, just skip the bad whiskey. Go for the good whiskey. Don't do the cigarettes at all. I can seriously say that. I've smoked most of my life. I don't regret it, but I would not recommend it for anybody.
Okay.
In all honesty.
All right. Jim, could you just get a shot of me and Wayne, and then we'll turn this into a still. All right. Hey, man, thanks. That was great. Your testimony was moving. That's the best one that we got. Yeah. I mean, we got a lot of good ones, but that was really great.
Well, it's the truth. I'm just speaking from the heart, Right on. Hoping it turns out good.
Thank you, Jim, for that extra time. Yeah, good day, Dr. Eiko. You can stay right there.
Well, these guys are talking. I don't want to interrupt them. So.
Okay, I think we can do it.
All right.
Okay.
This bag right here.
Okay.
What? What
So
am I doing?
he's going to shoot over your shoulder. You're not going to be on camera.
Oh, that's
I know this technique.
Okay.
Okay.
All right.
All right.
Now, are we ready, Jim? Of anyone that could be considered a founding father, the founding father of KVSC, your name would be in a very small group and perhaps the one. How do you feel about that?
Well, actually, the one is E. Scott Price. I'm minor compared to him, but I was there, so I'm happy to claim whatever credit I can get. But Scott Price was the man who made this thing happen. We dreamed about it before he got here, and when he came, it became reality. So I give him full credit.
All right. Well, a lot of credit has been given to you as well as someone who, just as a young person, had a commitment to it. Why? Why did you put all the work into this concept that really was very little and, well, nothing when you started, and then it was just a 10-watt signal? Why did you put so much into it?
That's a good question, because I actually came here as a student to be a science teacher, and I majored in math, chemistry, and physics until I discovered there was life outside the lab, like women and beer and things like that. And my roommate actually came to be a broadcaster. Well, he ended up in his career being a math teacher for 35 years, and I ended up being in broadcasting. So we sort of exchanged vocations in the middle of the night. But he dragged me to a Radio Guild meeting, and he said, these people are nice, and they're doing kind of fun things, but they don't have a goal in mind. They don't have a mission. And so we talked about what should the mission be? What should we be looking for? And having a radio station was the thing that we decided on. And so we put all our effort into getting that done.
How important was the social turmoil at the time, 1967, and the years that followed? How important was that to you and your colleagues to create a voice that might not be heard otherwise?
Well, I mean, it seemed like normal at the time, but you look back to that period, and it was just tumultuous. I mean, people talk about, oh, this is the worst year, last year was. No, 1968 is the worst year that I experienced. That was just incredibly crazy. And there was a way to channel some of that energy and that thought into the radio station. And we tried to do that. We had a real commitment to news and public affairs as well as entertainment.
Well, do you remember this? Wasn't the president of St. Cloud State University at one time kidnapped or something, held hostage by students?
Oh, no, actually, they occupied his office. And I had just transitioned out as the student manager of KVSC, and my successor was a guy named Jeff Blair. And we were sent off to the NAB conference in Washington, D.C. And there I got the only telegram I've ever gotten in my life. It says, "Students have occupied president's office. Wish you were here. Stop." And that was it. And it was a time. It was actually African-American students, and they were demanding some curriculum, and eventually came out of it the African-American Student Center and other things. So I wasn't here for it, but I was involved by telegram.
Okay. I have a couple of questions that I think are intriguing, and I'm going to pose both of them to you. You can ask them in the order that seems most appropriate.
Okay.
What do you think is your major contribution to KVSC, and what do you think KVSC's most profound contribution to your life has been?
Well, obviously, my life has been a career in broadcasting, and if I hadn't been here at that time and participated in those things, it wouldn't have happened. And, you know, the classroom education was great, but building a radio station was a much better education and preparation for what I did for the rest of my life. And I certainly learned some leadership skills that I didn't have when I came. And those were incredibly important too. As far as KVSC is concerned, I mean, just building it and getting it moving, and our little group of people that did that was, we laid the foundation and other people built on it. And that's always the way it works. Somebody does something and somebody builds on that and somebody builds on that, and pretty soon you have something great like KVSC is and continues to be.
If KVSC were a person who was turning 50, how would you wish KVSC a happy birthday?
Well, I'd just say happy half a century. I mean, that puts it in perspective. You know, 50 years, half a century? Man, that's significant. So that's what I'd say.
Well done.
All right.
Thank you, Andy.
Oh, you're welcome, Al.
You're good with words.
Who is this guy?
This is Andy Marlowe.
I want him to say it. I don't
Oh,
know who he
okay.
is.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I never asked him who he was. Now I'm going to take what's at the end and put it at the beginning.
Okay, that's fine. I've heard of editing. I've done that with razor blades and otherwise.
Okay. Just tell us who you are and your role at KVSC.
My name is Andy Marlowe, and I was the last general manager of the Radio Guild and the first student station manager of KVSC. So I was there for the transition from student organization to radio station, and I was actually the first person heard on the air at 4 o'clock in the afternoon on May 10th, 1967. And now I have audio of it.
Wow.
Which I did not know existed.
How did that come to you? Who had it?
Well, actually, there was a student volunteer named Kathy McGilligan, who for some reason recorded everything. And we didn't know about it. I mean, Joe had asked me a month or so ago, what was the first thing that was said on the air? I didn't remember, even though I had said it. And I remembered the circumstance and all the people gathered around and everything that was going on. But one of the other people who was there then who knew someone who knew Kathy McGilligan got in touch with her and said, "Oh, I've got all that on tape." So she sent me, well, she didn't send me, she sent the person who was the contact to the person, and it eventually got here, and I had Jim duplicate off a bunch of them today.
Is that just you with those first words on KVSC, or is it a collection of audio from throughout that time?
It's a collection of odd stuff. One of the things that I talked about a bit is we had a Radio Guild KVSC intramural basketball team. Basketball was the thing. Hockey hadn't been invented yet back in 1967. And we were the absolute worst intramural basketball team that ever existed. I think our record was 1-20. And the only game we won was by forfeit against the best team in the league because they misread the schedule and didn't show up. But we did a parody of the Coach's Corner program that's on every living small market radio station in the country. So I was the player coach. So I was on every Thursday with a guy named Jeff Herberg, and we did a kind of a robust takeoff on the Coach's Corner. And Sue Grove, who was Sue A. Strike then, has a collection of stuff that you wouldn't believe, including a clipping from the College Chronicle with a picture of Jeff Herberg and I, and talking about Coach's Corner and the fact that if the game that week wasn't too embarrassing besides the coach, some player might show up. So there are 2 Coach's Corners on here, which unbelievable to me.
Wow. For you and your group, that's buried treasure.
Oh yeah, and now uncovered. So we're happy about that.
See, there's one more thing that I just thought of that I'm sure that you must have been instrumental in the creation of Ampers and KVSC's affiliation with that group.
Well, I didn't have anything to do with KVSC getting involved, but I was teaching at Rainy River Community College with Dick Hill at the time, and we operated the 10-watt station there. And we got involved through a convoluted process that was intended to prioritize federal money going into public stations in Minnesota, because certain people were getting all of it and other people weren't getting any. And we never were able to work that out, but the small stations decided we've got something in common, so we got together and formed Ampers. And Jim Peeler and I wrote the bylaws and the articles of incorporation, and we made up that name Ampers. I don't know how we ever did that.
I believe it's one of the cleverest and most appropriate acronyms that exist. Most acronyms are only 3 letters,
Yeah.
but it's the Association of Minnesota Public Educational Radio Stations. Even the S counts.
Yes, it does. So I give Peeler half the credit. So,
could you define for whoever might be listening, Ampers? I mean, what that is in the physical world, because you have that kind of technical literacy.
well, it really is an organization of small.
No, I'm talking about Ampers in the physical world, like the electrical part of it.
Well, actually, it should have another E in it. It'd be amperes, and it is one of the 3 measures of electricity. Voltage, which is the push through the wire, amperage, which is the strength of it, and amperes is the combination of the 2. Okay. And then there are also ohms, we can throw that in, which is the resistance to the flow of electricity. So that's probably more than anyone would ever want to know.
I just wanted to know. That's just me. All right. Thank you, Andy.
All right.
Thanks again.
Thanks, Al.
Thanks for all you've done for KVSC.
I had so much fun doing it. I don't deserve any thanks. I had all of the fun. So,
Well said.
all right.
Thank you. Joe has a particularly, let me know when you're rolling.
Hey, Eric, the plates are below the clock. And there's cheese and crackers by where you're going. Okay.
Yeah. That's almost symbolic of your job here at KVSC, because just as we're preparing to do an interview, you need to direct someone on cheese and crackers. And the next thing you know, there's going to be a dog coming by. Who knows what will happen next. So if I'm not mistaken, you engaged with KVSC as a person when you were very young, like high school, maybe even before.
When the replacements were, Here Comes the Regular, all the, the classic albums. So I started listening to KVSC in high school. I was turned on by an alternative gal in high school who back then she dyed her hair. She had her room painted black. I had one high school buddy who was it was the punk rock movement. He went for the Spikes, and I found out about KVSC and started listening. I listened to Kirby Puckett Day. I called in on. There's that cheese and crackers. I called in on Kirby Puckett Day because I was a kind of a super fan, and I won a Kirby Puckett poster because I knew all of his minor league games and stats because I was a nerd. But I started listening to KVSC in high school. I didn't like pop music. I didn't care for that formula. and I gravitated towards something different. And I've always loved that about people too. I like quirky, but KVSC, I mean, that was the heyday of the late '80s. I was listening. Bonnie Amistadi doing the news, you on the air, Kevin Ridley. I mean, I would be getting ready to go to work at my part-time job, turn the news. I knew where I was. I had to be, if I was running late for my day, if they were playing like Nature Watcher or something. You know, I knew how to time my day based on the little programs on the air too.
Wow.
Yeah.
So the fact that you engaged and became an announcer and maybe a news director for a while, and then have been station manager here for I think 26 years.
Not quite that. This August starts my 25th year.
25th, okay.
But I got to tell you my story. I came here in the fall of '87 as a student, lived on campus, and they were doing a promo on the Atwood Mall, where if you list KVSC, come to the Atwood Mall, we'll give you something. And that's where I met like Steve Seiberling, and then I came I took a radio class, a news writing class with John DeSanto, and this is before they could block students out of classes if you weren't in the major. And you go to the class, he says, if you are not in the major, because the enrollment was at 17,000 plus, it was huge, and I was taking kind of classes in high school, that post-secondary thing, but if you're not in the major, get out of my class, try to intimidate you out. But I just sat there, and I kept my mouth shut, and I put my head down, and I worked, and then I started writing stories for class. You had to write 20 news stories, and if you got them aired on KVSC with a soundbite, you only had to write 10. Every one you wrote, you got one back. So I started writing for Amy Franti, and at that time, KVSC was over in Centennial Hall because Stewart Hall was being renovated. So then Amy Franti started having me come in, and she would take these news breaks from Britain, didn't like the way the announcers identified themselves, so I would splice and edit out the identifiers in between of who is the British style, how they say who they are. She didn't like it, so I just learned how to splice and edit because she made me take it out. So then the next year I just started work. When he came over here, I started working in the newsroom, and I was afraid to get on the air. And a guy named Matt Holden, who was also in the newsroom, I had been doing stories, interviewing, all this stuff. He put me in the on-air studio and held the door handle and said, you're not getting out here until you host that news. And I got minimal training, but I knew how to write stories and gather audio, but you're not coming up, you're on the air in 10 minutes, and they held the door handle.
Wow.
It was like, you're ready for this. Basically, they were pushing me off more than a nudge, and that's how I got on the air. And then Kyle started asking me to fill in. I did Sunday morning eclectic breakfast. And then I started doing progressive rock show on. Yeah, so I was full hook, line, and sinker. But I got very little training at that point. I took your classes, of course, which are fantastic, and we all have wonderful memories of your classes. But that was my story. I got literally door handles held, and I couldn't come out until I hosted the news hour. And then I left. I graduated in '91, and then I worked for Andy Hilger for a year. And then Kevin was done with the position, and I applied.
Yes,
so.
And we both recommended you.
Yeah.
We steered. It was another kind of like, I suppose, a push, but you were definitely ready by that time. But it's a way in which I think we consciously directed a major chapter of your life, because we're like, she's the one.
Yeah, Kevin called me and said, you've got to apply. And I was like, I don't know. I've only been working 10 months at WJON in 98 Country. And he said, no, you got to apply. You got to apply. And I applied. And they had a search committee. And I learned later there was about 17 applicants. But I figured they wanted somebody young and willing to work 50 hours, 60 hours a week, which I was willing to do. I mean, but it's kind of hard to articulate, but I wish I had one more year. I certainly learned a lot more on the other side of learning radio there, but just because I mentored under Tim Lyon, and but in hindsight, I mean, it changed my life. Yeah. It changed my life.
And it defined your life. Yeah.
Here we are.
So I kind of like this set of questions that I just kind of stumbled upon when I was interviewing Wayne Bergerson. What has been the most profound way that KVSC has affected your life or your outlook on life? And what do you think has been your major contribution or your legacy to KVSC?
I met what was no longer my partner, but I met my partner here and was together with him for 23 years, and I have an 11-year-old daughter currently because of that. Right. So I know there's lots of people who connected and maybe don't connect anymore, but you keep those relationships positive. So for me personally, it changed my life with my life partner of that time frame. I was able to G. Gordon Liddy, Timothy Leary. We walked up to him, Al, and we got interviews with them, and we got sound bites. I mean, I was able to have access to those kind of moments, and as long as you have the moxie, you get it done. For me, I can think 1,000 things. Interviewing musicians in studio, everything from just incredible musicians come in and they perform live on the air with you, to organizing concerts. How it's where I am now in my life is I think of all my current students as kind of my own kids, and I care about them, and Jim cares about them, and I watch their successes with pride, and I want to know how they're doing. And so for me, I've kind of taken a role of our job is to see them succeed. Our job is to give them these tools and this kindness and maybe a little bit of hardness when they need it, and push them, raise a bar, because they'll get there. So I see my job as, giving students that opportunity that I had. Yeah.
Well, you're not known as Mama Joe for nothing.
Yeah. And the station's changed in that we get some this arts funding, and so we do a lot more in the community now. So unfortunately, my job has gotten a little bit more administrative for grant management for the arts and culture, but then we do great things in the community. So I feel like I do miss I'm hands-on with the students, but not as much as I used to be. I'm not as hands-on with the newsroom, for example, as I used to. I still contact Ailey on that, but I used to really drive them, push them more. But there's only so much in a day, that you can do. So I miss, and I don't get to do a music show. I host a news hour once a week, but I used to do a weekly news show or a music show. Then it became bi-weekly. Then I just couldn't do it. Becoming a mother and all that stuff. So I miss being on the air. Every now and then somebody's late to their shift, like they don't get here by 9 a.m. and I get 30 minutes to do it. Because I'm here at 8:30, so when somebody's got to go, I get 30 minutes every now and then. I don't get too angry at them too, because I get 30 minutes.
Wonderful. Well, I certainly did my part for your cause when I was here.
And think about in this alumni weekend, as we had this gathering yesterday, and more people kept showing up. My heart just fills. You just see these people, and the life experiences we had, just growing up together. We're part of a radio station, but you also get out and socialize, and you become who you are with those relationships. My relationships are the people who are back here now. Just seeing them who I haven't seen in 10 years is just, and you fall right in line with everybody, and you share your memories and you catch up, and that's been a big important thing of this weekend for me.
Yeah. There's been a lot of heart and soul here today. It was very gratifying to see so many people show up today, and everybody mingling so well and enjoying the photos and just being together for a common love.
Yeah, and I agree. It's all about the connections and the people and the love of, I think radio people, even if you're not necessarily on the air, they're a little off left, they're a little quirky, and that's maybe bring this whole conversation full circle. That's what kind of brings them all together, and you gravitate towards each other, and you find your people. This is a place where you find your people. I want to tell you a funny little thing I heard from one of the guys who was describing how they changed the format, from classical in 1975 to get more of the progressive. He said, "I was a theater major, but I came over to the radio station. They were not so clicky, and they had better dope."
Yeah, I met that guy.
And I thought that was, and every generation has that. And I just thought that was just the funniest thing, aside from how they flipped the format, and maybe you've got that on tape, but that kind of says a lot. They found their people. Yeah.
Well done. That's probably our close there. If KVSC were a person, if we were, going around a birthday party and you wanted to say happy birthday to KVSC, what would you say to that person?
You're strong, you're sexy, you're valuable, you're important, you matter to people, and you can kick and keep on kicking.
All right. Well done. Thanks, Joe.
Thank you.
Get her name and what she does.
Oh, my goodness, yeah. Well, everybody knows that,
But
but
that's
yes. Okay. So just, are we still rolling in? Tell us who you are and what your role has been at KVSC.
I am Joe McMullen Boyer. I'm currently the station manager, and prior to that, I was a student news director and a volunteer.
What were your active years? What are your active years at KVSC?
87 to 91 as a student, and 92 to current as manager.
Ooh, you're racking them up.
I'm racking them up.
Pass me by.
Yeah. Well, we'll see. I'm entering 25, so I'm kind of seeing about 10 to go. We'll see. Yeah.
Thanks, Joe.